Our speaker today is Bryce of the Horticultural Science Department at NC State University, where he is the undergraduate coordinator of the 2-year and the 4-year degree programs there. Now at NC State, Bryce has been awarded the Outstanding Teacher Award 3 times, which is sort of unusual, I think. Congratulations, Bryce. He's also earned the NC State University Alumni Distinguished Award as well. He's best known to most of us as the host of the popular UNC TV show called In the Garden, which basically introduces gardening to non-gardeners and other horticulturists. He has degrees from the University of Massachusetts and also from the Ohio State University. He's here today to speak about what's new, great garden plants for the home garden. Please welcome Bryce Lane.
Thank you, Bobby. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Is that all right? Okay, good. I'll get louder. Okay, so as is customary when I get invited to a talk, I prepare it, and then I come and I set up, and I always like to come early and chat with people and watch you, and then I make adjustments. Okay, so here's an adjustment. Mark Wethington, Tim Alderton, Tony Avent, Dennis Werner, Pat McCracken, Doug Byrne, Edith Edelman, and you invited me to come and talk about new plants. I feel a little bit intimidated in that regard, but my approach might be a little bit different than you might expect. This isn't necessarily, although you have a handout that has a list of plants, I could see some of you looking at it going, well, I know that one. Well, that one's been around forever. That this list, this presentation today is really more about a perspective. So with that, let's. I could have gotten them too. Let's get started. And what I'd like to know. Oh, by the way, just like here, you could say our 2 new plants. This one, the result of very highfalutin plant breeding associated with a major university, a world-renowned plant breeder by the name of Tom Rainey. Introduces the Storm series of Chinomales speciosa, the flowering quince, and this is Scarlet Storm. It's this huge, big red flower. And then Dr. Dennis Werner is vacationing down on Sunset Beach because he has a house down there, and I don't, but he lets me go down there every once in a while. And he's walking in Sunset Beach, and he sees these 4 o'clocks look like this, and so he collects seeds from those 4 o'clocks, and sure enough, they come true from seed, which is really fascinating. So these just kind of represent 2 different ways that we often see new plants. So we're going to talk about that. But let me set the tone first, if I might. Gardening is not, a garden's not an object, but it's a process. And I tell you this, I see heads shaking. I think most of you would all agree that I think part of the love of what we do in the garden has to do with the fact that it's a process and not that it's an object, that it's a process that never ends. This is part of my garden this summer. It looked totally different last summer and will look totally different next summer, at least in that area. Gardening is not complicated. Some of you are going, what? It's hard, okay? Now I think that's the problem, is all too often the companies that try to sell us gardening products try to make it sound complicated, so we'll have to buy more products. But really, if we know some basic principles about gardening, it's not that complicated. If we understand soil chemistry, soil physics, we understand light, temperature, plant growth, those kinds of things. And that sounds horrible, but it's really pretty straightforward. As gardeners, you have all either been taught or learned it yourself through your gardening process. But it's just hard, okay? I only use, if you do the proper soil preparation, for example, gardening can be less complicated. It still is hard. Okay. So what am I going to try to do today in a very short period of time? I have 3 goals. One is I want to influence your thinking. I want maybe perhaps to share something that you hadn't thought about, maybe some bit of knowledge you didn't know. Okay. But I'm well aware of the fact that each and every one of you might be something different that you would be thinking. The second thing I want to do is I want to affect your feelings. Okay. Now this is always risky if you give a presentation and your goal is to affect people's feelings. Because that means some of you might be feeling bad about something I say. Maybe you're angry. That's good. I want you to feel something about what you hear or see today. And then those of us that teach in a university or college setting, oftentimes my colleagues stop there. They want the students to learn something and they want them to be excited about something. But I have a third goal that I always bring with me to a presentation like this, or to any classroom situation. That's, I want to affect your doing. All right, there's an application involved. And if by the end of today you decide to do something different, maybe just one little thing differently, then that will be a complete morning for me. So in essence, what I'm trying to do is cultivate your passion. Okay, cultivate your passion. Cultivate something you take care of, something that you work on. And so hopefully today you'll do that. You say, well, what are you passionate about? Well, by the way, thanks for not going to the fair this morning. Coming here. Okay, I'm going to the fair tomorrow with 3 out of my 4.8 grandchildren. So I'm gonna have to get extra sleep tonight. It's gonna be pretty interesting. But okay, so what lights me up? Picture this: it's March, it's 35 degrees, it's windy, and it's sleeting. And I'm at the Chicago Botanic Garden with a group of students who all decided to go into the gift shop and restaurant instead of see the garden. So I'm out walking through the garden with a colleague who happened to stray off. He comes back and he said, Bryce, I've never been to the Chicago Botanic Garden. He said, Bryce, you have got to come with me up over this hill and take a look at the Japanese garden. So, okay, you got the picture in your mind. It's cold, it's raw, and I come up over the hill, and my passion was cultivated.
Wow.
I don't know if those of you have been to the Chicago Botanic Garden, but one of the most beautiful areas, as far as I'm concerned, is the Japanese garden. A Japanese garden where they take a plant that's not even native in Japan, and they create these, by hand, they create these wonderful Asian-esque, Japanese-type, very, very cultivated, very trained plants. Those are Scotch pine, Pinus sylvestris, all right? And there's over 200 of those on 3 different islands. And these branches like this are all done by they take the branch and they wire it, they pull it down. It's kind of like giant bonsai in the ground, okay? So I come over the hill and I got weak in the knees. I said, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I said, we have to come back to the Chicago Botanic Garden in the summer, and I'm going to do a show on the Chicago Botanic Garden. So today at noon, you can tune in if you are home. If not, you'll probably still be here because I'll probably still be talking. But tomorrow at 11:30, Monday at 2:30, we feature the Chicago Bot Garden on our show this week, and we're really excited about that. So just to show you how excited I was about it, I told my colleague, take my picture. Now the question is, why are you laughing? It was cold. The only reason this hand did not have a glove on is because that's the one I used to press the shutter on my camera. All right, it was horrible out there. But anyway, that just gives you a little bit of background about the kinds of things that cultivate my own passion. Of course, I was going through getting ready, someone come and they said, oh, that's my favorite place to go. And then we got to joking around about Big Bloomers versus Plant Delight's Nursery, and how some people go to Plant Delight's, they see all the new plants that Tony has out, and they get all excited and they write a list, and then they leave. They don't buy anything at Tony's, and then they go to Big Bloomers and they buy them there at half the price that Tony. You said Tony was your speaker next to me? I'd say it to his face. Anyway, in April, it's my birthday in April, so in April, some of you actually heard me talk about this before. In April, I take the seats out of the minivan, and I get my brother and my neighbor Dan, who's a born-again gardener, and the 3 of us, we go to Big Bloomers, and my daughter and her husband and children live in Sanford. We don't even stop at their house. We go right to Big Bloomers when they open that Saturday morning, and we spend the whole day at Big Bloomers, and we have a contest. Who spends the most money? Whoever spends the most money wins. Wins what? Nothing. Actually, we lose because we spent the most money. But, you know, Big Bloomers is probably one of the most they're one of the most unique and interesting garden centers, and they break all the rules of retail horticulture. You know, the rows are real narrow, you can't even get your wagon through. Plants are organized, plants are propagated right where they're merchandised, but it's a fantastic place to go and buy plants. And so we go, and there's my born-again gardener neighbor Dan. There's my brother Brian. He's 5 years younger than me, and just moved to Raleigh 5 years ago, and all of a sudden he fell in love with gardening. Up until that point, he couldn't even tell you the difference between a petunia and a marigold. And now he gets excited. Of course, he's never won the contest. He's not willing to spend as much money as myself or Dan. So this is for all you for the rock garden folks here, okay? Okay, just to let you know that I do like plants that are little and fit near rocks. And so I said, Brian, take my picture. So my brother took my picture. I said, no, get closer. Okay, so you can see how exciting it is. Then I go home, and of course I win every year. And then I go home and I put them on my patio, I put them on the table, and then I look at them for 3 days. Or 4 days, or maybe a whole week. Why? Because you have to go to work? No, because that's part of the passion, is just to look at them. Oh, I'm so excited, I'm going to plant you in my garden. And so then I just go out and look at, my wife comes out, she says, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking at my plants. And then finally I decide I'm going to go ahead and plant them, right? So I grab 3, put them in my arm like this, and then I walk out in my garden. What am I looking for? I'm looking for a hole, right? So then I find a hole, and I take the plant, then I look at the tag, and I see full sun, partial, shady, and then... Okay. Now, guys, I teach right plant, right place. Okay, but in my own garden, I'm out here going, oh yeah, this looks sunny. And I plant that. Okay, so I confess, I do the same thing y'all do. Okay, we preach a good story. Oh, we have to prepare the soil. We have to make sure the light exposure and everything. And then it's like, yep, this will do. I'll try it. I get about 80% success. About 80% success. 20% of them die. And I usually blame that on big bloomers and their propagation. But oftentimes it has to do with my misplacing or placing in a wrong place. And somewhere in there is one of the plants that's one of the plants that we'll talk about today. And I'll get to the plants here in a second. But anyway, I just want to let you know I'm a gardener too. And those of you familiar with the Department of Horticultural Science, just because someone's a professor in horticulture doesn't mean they're an avid gardener. And frankly, NC State actually has perhaps the greatest percentage of gardeners, okay, that are professors in horticulture than any university across the land. And we take great pride in the fact that there are many of us professors in the department who garden, because that's not necessarily a given. I mean, we got Julia Cornegay in her garden, Denny Werner, and Ann Spafford, myself, Will Hooker, and boy, I'll tell you what, those gardens, you want to see an array of different kinds of gardens. It's quite amazing. But so I'm real proud of that we're a bunch of gardeners too, and I think that makes us actually better horticulture professors. So where are we going to start? I think we probably should start with where do new plants come from, because we hear all about these new plants. By the way, it is cool to have a new plant. Okay, the latest and greatest gardening trend in 2011 is it's the new plant thing. The late J.C. Ralston I really would love to have a chat with him right now and say, well, what do you think about what you started? Okay, I think he'd be probably really excited about some of it, and I think he'd probably be mortified about other parts of it, to be honest with you, okay? But it's like we gardeners, everyone wants the newest plant, the latest and greatest plant. There are now companies out there that do nothing but market the latest plant. And oftentimes the newest plant lasts only about 2 years, and then it's forgotten, okay? So where do they come from? Where do all these new plants come from? You'd think that the human beings would have found all the plants there are on the earth. We haven't, okay? And not only have we not only just not found them all, but we haven't made them all, and we haven't discovered some of the changes. So, there's still plant exploration, there's still discovery. They're still going to some place and seeing a plant that is unique and different from all others in its species, maybe all others in its genus, a larger group. But discovery is one of the ways that new plants are found and then introduced, okay? Another method or type of this discovery is seedling selection. Seedling selection, where you're walking and or driving or whatever, and a chance seedling, a seed from a plant germinates, grows, and genetically it's different enough that it shows something unique and different. And you go, holy smokes, look at that. You would be amazed how many plants have been discovered and introduced that are what we call seedling selections. Okay, now here's an interesting thing about seedling selections. And some of you are starting to get a little nervous because you're going, this sounds like a class. Okay, but here's the interesting about seedling selections. Most of the time, those unique individuals that came from a chance seedling do not have children that look anything like them. And that poses a big challenge for us horticulturists, because it's like we have something that's desirable, but the only way we can make more of them, because it's all about having that new plant, and people will pay lots of money for that, is how do we make more of that if it will not come true from seed, like that variegated 4 o'clock. So that's a challenge that we face. We propagate them vegetatively. We take cuttings, we do it that way, we clone them, we graft them, Okay, seedling selection. The other way is genetic mutations. I'll show you a couple of examples in a few minutes about genetic mutations, where the plant has a certain look to it, and then somewhere on one of the branches, something mutates, and a branch comes out and it's different. And it's not only different, but it's desirable. Okay, there are lots of plant mutations people look at and go, well, that sucks. Nobody will ever be interested in that. Okay, it's those that are desirable. You get a mutation in one species of plant, you get a mutation on average about 1 every 50,000 individuals. That's how common mutations are. That's how rare mutations are, 1 in 50,000. In fact, scientists even try irradiating, treating plants with chemicals to get them to mutate more. But interestingly, we find that the natural mutations are the ones that generally often yield two things. One, the most desirable cultivars, and two, the most stable cultivars. There's nothing worse than a plant that's unstable. Okay? Some of you are going, I know some people like that. But an unstable plant is one that has that unique characteristic, and then over time it says, I think I'm going to go back to the way I was. Very disappointing if you're a gardener. Of course, then there's plant breeding. NC State has an incredible plant breeding crew of professors who are involved in plant breeding, from the sweet potato, okay, not just the ornamental sweet potato, the edible sweet potato, to the white potato, okay, to small fruits, to ornamentals. We have 2 faculty in our department, 2 whole faculty that devoted their professional lives right now to breeding new ornamental plants. Dr. Tom Rainey and Dr. Dennis Werner. Oh wow, is that not cool? And both of them are gardeners, and that makes it even cooler because Dr. Werner is looking at the plants that he's developing from what would go best in his garden as a gardener. See, there's that application. Sometimes we'll get a combination of the above. Okay, you know this plant. Most of you know this plant. This came from the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. J.C. Ralston and Richard Hartledge took Callicanthus floridus, the native species, and crossed it with the Asian species. Sinocallicanthus sinensis. They crossed it, collect some seeds, and then they selected from those seeds, seedling selection, this guy right here, which has the size of the flower of the Chinese, of the Asian species, which was large and cream colored, but it has the color related to the native species, Callicanthus floridus. All right, and from that they selected one that had these characteristics and then propagated it vegetatively. So that now we can go to a garden center and we can buy Callicanthus floridus, Callicanthus ralstonii Hartledge wine, that cultivar of plant. And of course, here's that. I asked Denny just the other day, so what are you calling this? He said, Sunset Beach Variegated. I said, well, that's helpful, that's descriptive. Came from Sunset Beach, and the flower is variegated. I find this fascinating, having talked with Denny in great depth about the fact that this comes true from seed. So there's an example of seedling selection. I put this, you all know it, it's Worthia. Okay, chrysanthemum. Available, great deciduous plant, winter flowering, fragrant, yellow, gorgeous. Okay, everybody's got one in their garden now. I am reminded, I put this in here because we're here today. I'm reminded of a day where this building was not here, okay, where there were some storage and some shed-like buildings up over there. And I remember one day I was out here, and it was February, and I was out here preparing for a lab, and JC called me over, like he often did, and said, come here, I want to show you something. And he brought me around to that shed that had equipment and whatnot in it, behind the shed, over by the lath house, and he walked up, he said, have you ever seen anything like this? And I saw, for my first Edgeworthia. I said, what on earth? He said, yep, comes from Korea, and he starts telling about the fact that the fibers in the stem were used for paper. I mean, I had my own Friends of the Arboretum lecture right there with JC, right there, for 10 minutes, and he did this often, all right? And I said, well, where is this plant? He said, right here. I said, where else? He said, right here. Okay? And so I get kind of Twitter-pated when I think about the fact that now this plant is everywhere. And rightly so. It's a wonderful, wonderful landscape plant. But that's where it all started, behind a shed at this little 8-acre arboretum. We could be Friends of the Arboretum. We could be proud of the fact that really cool stuff comes out of here. And it was that vision that has led to this big, giant new plants. But I want to tell you one last thing about JC. He wasn't about the new plant. He was about the plant. Okay, if he thought that Cornus Florida was worth talking about within the context of a garden, he would talk about it, and everyone would go out and buy quercifolia. It wasn't that it had to be the newest, the latest, the greatest. He was looking for just great plants that grow in North Carolina. And if it was a native plant, if it was a plant that's been here for a while and been underused or under-recognized, it was just as much about that before. So here we have two plants, one from a chance seedling, the other from a genetic mutation. Okay? Just read, excuse me, just read that there's the new Weigela came out of Tom Rainey's breeding program. Well, came out of his program, but interestingly enough, Weigela Florida Sunset is a chance seedling. It just happened to be a seedling in a collection of Weigela that Tom discovered that had this tricolored leaf. So there's an example of a seedling selection that's been cloned, and now it's being touted as a new great Weigela for the home garden. And I would say, who cares if it flowers or not? And that's my feeling, okay? Secondly, this is little honey hydrangea. It's been around for a while. It's not a brand new plant. But there's an example of a genetic mutation. A bud on a stem mutated, and when that stem came out, the leaves were chartreuse. And so that was propagated, and now we buy little honey hydrangea. So many years ago, I took a group of students on a field trip up to the Delaware Valley. I do this frequently. We're up there, and this was, by the way, this is the age of film. Okay, I just wanted that sets that you know what the age of digital photography did not exist. And so I had a lot of these little film canisters, and I would find myself at places like Longwood Gardens collecting seeds of plants and putting them in the little film canisters. It was great. You could fit about 100 Japanese maple seeds in a film canister. Okay? And so there I am up by the big Longwood Eye. There's a Acer palmatum sangukaku. Coral bark maple, okay, beautiful fall color in full seed. So I collect a bunch of seeds. Of course, we all know that Japanese maples don't come true from seed, all right, but I collected them anyway because I thought, who knows, maybe out of these 100, one of the kids will be cool. Okay, you can do that, okay? So I took the seeds, I came home, and I took the kids' sandbox because they weren't using it. Took the sand out. The only member of our family was a cat. So I took out the sand, it's true, took out the sand, filled it with potting soil, and I planted those 100 seeds. And I grew them there for 2 years, and I selected out the ones I thought looked most like their parent. Okay, the ones that didn't, I either threw away or I potted up and gave away to other people. And one of them that I potted up and gave away, I gave to my neighbor Dan, all right, and I saw nothing of it for years. Now, can you imagine the Thanksgiving weekend, I go home, I'm home, I go down to the end of the driveway to pick up my newspaper. Do you remember newspapers? I still get one. And Monday's like one sheet. Sorry, I didn't mean, I'm editorializing here. Okay, so I go down and I pick up the newspaper and I turn, and this is what I see. Oh my gosh, it's a Japanese maple with the most brilliant red fall color. This is not photoshopped. Okay, most brilliant red fall color, and it's after Thanksgiving, so it's late November, and it's doing this. Okay. It was the maple I gave to my neighbor, and he planted it on his drive. Now I have a quandary, right? And this, JC was still alive, so I took some branches and I brought him in. I said, what do you think? Do you think this could be something that we could maybe develop into a cultivar because of the late great fall color? Okay, and I live on Ravenhill Drive, and so I said I'd even call it Ravenhill Red. That would be really neat. And JC said, well, maybe you should graft some and see what happens. So I started to graft some. Here's the problem, and this gets back to new plants and the challenge of coming up with new plants. I could never recreate that fall color in the ones that I grafted. So either there was some level of instability relative to the ability to produce this anthocyan and pigment, or the environment where that plant would respond to and do this was so narrow that you could never sell this as Ravenhill Red and people would be happy. Because one of the things about the new plants and the unique plants is, if it's going to be sold, it better look like it looks on the tag. And there needs to be that wide environmental leeway for that plant, because we're all going to go, yep, it's sunny all right, and then we're going to wonder why it doesn't look like they said it would look. Even some of the new plants that are coming out today have more narrow environments for that's why new plants are tested for such a long time. Because we want to make sure they're stable, but we also want to make sure that they will indeed do what we say they do. Okay? And so that's why there's a lot of evaluation going on everywhere, not just here at the Ralston Arboretum. 1957, Dr. Fred Cochran looked at a loblolly pine on a farm, and he looked way up, because loblollies are real big. They're not the greatest landscape tree, are they? He looked way up in the top of one, and he saw a branch that was infected with a disease called witch's broom, which causes dwarfness and proliferation of tissue. And there were cones hanging from that branch, which is highly unusual. And in those cones were viable seed, which never happens. And he took those seed back here. And of course, this wasn't here. This was a research farm, right? And he planted those seeds. And lo and behold, after 54 years, we see they grow only about 25 to 30 feet. So here's this group. Would this be a highly desirable ornamental plant for the residential landscape?
Yes.
A native loblolly pine that is kind of globe-shaped? Absolutely. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news? From cuttings, about 1% success. Grafting, oh, it's better, 2. Okay? So we've not been able to come up with a very reliable, economical, the nursery's going to make money doing this to reproduce this. So here's a plant that's absolutely priceless, that's worthless. And it doesn't gain value until we're able to make more where you can make money on. Now, some of you out there are going, yes, but I know of a nursery. Yes, there are some nurseries that grow this at the 1 to 3% success rate, right? And they sell it to crazy people who are willing to pay an awful lot of money for a really rare plant. And some of you are going, well, I do that. Those are called specialty nurseries. Okay, so that's my little primer for where new plants come from. And that's just an overview in general. But I have much greater appreciation for the plants that I have in knowing the challenges that scientists face and the unique, perhaps, chance of being able to find something that's different. It doesn't just, you just can't go in your backyard and look around and go, oh look, a mutation. Okay. I can't keep up with all these new plants. I can't. I'm going to tell you right now, I can't. Okay? There are so many new ones every year. There's so many new, there are companies. Okay, here are the new woodies. Here are the new herbaceous. Here are the new this, the new that. Okay? And then the names. Oh my gosh. All the new names. I honor and respect anybody that keep up with the new plants and also keep up with their names. Why is that? Because now we have varieties. We have cultivars. And then, I think this is where JC would probably put his foot down. Now we have these things called trademark names. Okay? Trademark names. Now companies have decided that they're going to own the name, and it's not going to be the cultivar. Oh, we see it in the cultivar slot. I mean, do you really know what the cultivar of Endless Summer is? Tim, what is it?
It's NC and a number.
I have no clue, okay? All right? What do we call it? Endless Summer. Everyone thinks Endless Summer is a cultivar. No, that's the trademark name. Now we have series. Sweet Caroline. Okay? The Storm series. I mean, Tom Rainey with those chinomelies. It's the Storm series. People walk into the garden center and say, I'm looking for, a quince from the Storm series. These are all the trademark names. Carl von Linné, who invented the binomial system, he rolls over in his grave every time someone walks into a garden center and says, I'm looking for the Storm series. It just goes totally against the botanical roots that we horticulturists have. And it makes it all the more confusing. But they're there, we have to deal with them, okay? And then there are these companies that have decided they are going to market not only their company, but plants along the way. And they've got new introductions, proven winners. We have some of our professors are even using, our breeders are using that company to promote their plants. Now I'm going to tell you something, JC wasn't the greatest marketer. He found this ligustrum that grew perfectly round, like everybody prunes them. Okay? And he found one that naturally grew perfectly round. And he named it, and his naming of it killed it. It killed it. Green meatball. I'm not kidding, he called it green meatball. Who's going to go out and buy ligustrum lucidum green meatball? Okay? No, so there is some benefit. He did. There is some benefit. There is some benefit to the idea that companies now are collectively trying to come up with names that draw people in to buy them. So Proven Winners is doing that, all right? Proven Winners is marketing and introduced Tom Rainey's Invincible hydrangea arborescens, the pink flowering hydrangea. All right, and of course, for every plant that's sold, there's a donation made to breast cancer. So this is a great, So I don't mean to poo-poo the trademark name so much. However, I can tell you that Invincible is not the cultivar name. Okay, then there's Plant Haven. Plant Haven, from breeder to market, they try to help plant breeders people discover plants, get that plant, watch this is their little thing, I took it off their website, that's why it's so blurry. But they say, okay, we got breeder, goes to Plant Haven, they help them get the patent, then it goes to a grower who has the growing rights, then it goes to a landscaper, the retailer, and then the consumer has it, and then the royalties go back to NC State or someone else who takes most of it and then gives a little bit back to the breeder. Whoops, that was an editorial statement that I probably shouldn't have made either. Okay. Are we having fun yet? This is for you rock garden people. I just want to take a minute, really, within the context of big bloomers. I want to just take a minute and talk a little bit about the importance of right plant, right place. Okay, that's a climbing hydrangea. This side of this beautiful wall, dry stack wall at Morton Arboretum, gets very little sun, and so the plants that they've chosen for that area respond well to shady and partially shady locations. This little garden area here has taken advantage of small nooks and crannies of plants underneath shade where it's quite moist, ginger, epimedium, that type of thing. So again, it's about lining up the right plant with the right environmental location and being honest about it. This is that same freestanding rock wall on the opposite side that gets significantly greater amounts of light. And you know, if you were going to choose to decide to start picking the right plant for the right place, then the hours of sunlight should be your number one place to start. And if you can line the light up with the plant, then a lot of the problems we have with plants looking like they're supposed to look will go away. And of course, the second, and not very far behind, has to do with soil prep. Okay, before you put that plant in the soil and prepping the soil. So, you know, now it's like, well, what plants do I want to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about today some of new improved that I've been exposed to. But here's my point. For me, this past field trip I just took to the Delaware Valley area, I saw 4 plants I was totally unfamiliar with, okay? Introduced to them. They were new to me. And yet I looked at someone who worked at Longwood and I said, man, is that new? No, we've had that for 4 years. It's been around for 4 or 5 years. But it's totally new to me. That's a new plant as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Secondly is, to honor what this Arboretum is all about, is I often like to talk about plants that are oldies but goodies, plants that oftentimes get forgotten because we have this preoccupation with new plants. Okay. Oh, I forgot to show you something. This is kind of a homemade story. I'll turn the light on real quick. We talk about chant seedlings. This is honeysuckle. This one's called Sarah's dreamsicle. Jeff Lewis is a horticulturist at the Elizabethan Gardens in Manio, and he was out in the woods. He was out in the woods, outside, you know, the formal garden area at the Elizabethan Gardens, and he saw this honeysuckle growing. And so he propagated it, and then he named it Sarah's dreamsicle because his daughter's name is Sarah. And the color of the flower looks like you know those creamsicles? He called it Sarah's dreamsicle. And so then he gave me one when we were down there a couple years ago, and I've got it growing on a little arbor in my garden. And it flowered most late spring, and then of course July it stopped. July it looked like it wasn't going to make it. And now I just went out and cut some of the flowers off. But there's a perfect example of what are the chances of that? You know. But sometimes it has to do with who's looking, right? How many people walk by things that are unique or different that they've never seen before? But, you know, I watched my students walk by this wonderful planting of Aesculus parviflora, bottlebush buckeye. Oh my gosh, I saw this, I decided I needed to go buy a new home and 5 acres. I'm serious, I get land envy when I go to big gardens because it's like, can you imagine, this is the yellow fall color. Now granted, it's a great plant for partial shade to partial sun. It's got lovely white spikes of flowers late. I don't even care. If it does this, I want it. Now can you imagine taking a chainsaw and cutting a hole, putting a little winding path, and in the middle put a little bench, and you go in there and read a book in the fall and not need light? Because the yellow from the leaves, that's just, and then here, this is at Longwood Gardens, and then you see how it, you know, it works as an understory for some of the other deciduous trees and the wonderful Norway spruce. Okay, so, yeah, Aesculus parviflora has got to be in every garden. And you're saying, you're actually talking about Ilex verticillata? Yes, I am, because no garden should be without winter berry. You got a low-lying area, a little bit of moisture, Partially shady to sunny location, great yellow fall color, but moreover these red pearl-like fruit. This was at Longwood Gardens. I approached it. It's on the road coming in. All right, this was just a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic. Now remember, Ilex verticillata, there are boy plants and girl plants, and only the girl plants produce fruit. It's dioecious. And only the girl plants produce fruit. So this is a big, just group of women. Okay? But they can't produce fruit unless there's at least one man around. All right? So I was intrigued. Where's the man? So I started walking around. There's a fence running right through. I had to climb the fence. I'm walking around. I found the man. Found him. Big giant smile on his face. I was going to put a little smile. Okay. This was a few years before when all the leaves had fallen off. Now who would not want to put that in their garden where these fruits stay on most through the winter? Winter berry gets its name because of the 2 or 3 inch snow that contrasts that wonderful red color. And then all the cultivars, you know, Ilex verticillata Red Sprite's been around for quite some time, but it only grows about this big. It's a wonderful little dwarf, about 2 to 3 feet tall. It's best pollinated by, if anybody wants to get Red Sprite, then you're going to need to buy Jim Dandy. What a great name for a male cultivar. Jim Dandy or Apollo. Those two flower, those males, flower at the same time that Red Sprite flowers, and so you can maximize your fruiting. Fantastic. And then when the leaves fall off, ooh, it's just wonderful. What? American beautyberry? I think this is perhaps one of the most underrated plants in the landscape. You say, yes, but I have a small landscape, and this is a big shrub. I have a small landscape, and this is a big shrub. And so what I do to this is every other March 1st, I take a chainsaw to it at ground level. And you can do that. And by the time fall comes, it will look like this. Every other March 1st, every other year. Compass it. Cut it right down the ground level. And you get wonderful magenta colored fruit. Now there's a new cultivar that Monrovia is advertising called Summer Snow. And the leaf is all mottled with kind of a variegation, looks like kind of spilled white paint on the leaf. And I can't find out too much more information about this, Tim. I don't know if it fruits as well as the...
It's the one I think it is. It does not fruit.
Not fruit.
For us, anyways.
As well.
And it's not an americana, but...
It's not, is it?
It's a japonica.
Is it a japonica? Okay. Well, I should have put it then with this slide. Callicarpa japonica has more pendulous branching than americana. Doesn't grow as large. Every bit as beautiful with the magenta colored fruit. Let's talk about the redbuds. You know, Denny would be really upset with me if I didn't talk about the redbuds, so talk about the redbuds. The Society of Municipal Arborists named it the Urban Tree of the Year in 2010. As a result, New York City planted over 3,000 redbuds in the city. Okay? As a result of the Society of Municipal Arborists touting this as the Urban Tree of the Year. Small flowering native trees, attractive foliage, lots of many unique cultivars, and of course it's native, all right? Small pink rose-colored flowers, which by the way are edible and high in vitamin C. Those of you that know that, you can take them, sprinkle them on your salad. Lots of unique and interesting cultivars. I know perhaps the one that made the biggest waves many, many years ago was Forest Pansy, which is a burgundy-colored leaf plant. Then not too recently, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Hearts of Gold was publicized, and Hearts of Gold was discovered by NC State graduate John Rothling. John graduated from our program, went to work for Plant Haven, and then he was in Greensboro visiting his parents. They were walking through the neighborhood. He happened to see a chance seedling in the backyard of a neighbor's. What was this? Okay. So that got introduced through Plant Haven, where the leaves come out in chartreuse, almost a yellow. Same pink flower. Okay, so those two we know about. Have you heard about Rising Sun? Isn't that great? I might have called it Setting Sun, but Rising Sun, okay, I guess it rises orange and turns more yellow. Okay, very rich, deep color in the spring when the new leaves come out. And then, of course, Traveler. And I'm showing you Traveler not because I don't think you know about it, but I'm showing you Traveler for one reason. Most of the time we see Traveler like this, right? It's grafted on a redbud standard. And it's grafted, and depending on how tall that standard is, that's how it mounds on itself. Because if you grew it on its own root system, it would just mound on itself. It would be a lump. You call it Cercis canadensis texensis lumpy. Okay? But you can get them like that. Not, well, that's grafted. This one is growing on its own root system. This is one that Denny Werner gave me years ago. I planted it on the edge of my retaining wall, and it flows over. So just based on the way that it grows, grafted or on its own root system, you might be able to use it in a different spot. And it produces the flowers just as well as the other. Here it is in the middle of the summer. You see it flowing over, so it has a nice effect if you could get it up high and let it cascade down. And this is why I have it there. For the one time every 3 years we get enough snow that it creates the branching in and of itself is unique. Okay, so 1998, Dr. Dennis Werner decides that he thinks redbuds are a great group of plants. JC was big on redbuds. Dennis decides I'm going to start applying some of my breeding skills to redbuds. We need some new redbuds. And of course, plant breeders, the first thing they do is they sit down with a piece of paper and they write down what would be desirable for a redbud that we don't have. And you know, we have Traveler, and we have this plant called Covey. This is Covey, a weeping green. All right, we had Forest Pansy. Denny Werner said, "Boy, you know what we don't have? Is we don't have a weeping red." And so what he did was he said, okay, I'm going to take these two and I'm going to use these two in sexual reproduction to try to breed a weeping red one. And so just listen what he did. He took two plants that were mature, ready to flower. He put them in a cage. All right, and he collected the pollen from one of them, from Forest Pansy, and he pollinated the flowers of Covey. And he let them grow into seeds. So the children knew exactly who their parents were. That's called the F1, the first generation. Right? He collected 19 seeds, planted them out in a block down in Sandhills Region Research Farm. He planted 19 plants away from any other redbuds. So when they started to flower, they were going to have sex amongst themselves, but not any other. He isolated them. And he collected all their kids. Now, what do you suppose the children, the F1 of these two looked like when they started to grow up? What do you think they might have looked like? They were big, typical size, green-leafed, pink flowering redbuds. The first generation. Every last one of them. And Dr. Werner knew that was going to happen because he's a plant breeder. I would have been surprised, but I'm not a plant breeder. Okay? He understands his genetics. And so then he let them reproduce amongst themselves and collected about 400 seeds from those fruit, and he planted them out. And 42 of those 400 looked like this, something like this. Had a weeping, burgundy-colored characteristic. And so what he did is he went through those 42, and he grew them for 4 years, watched them, and he picked the one that held the color the longest, had the finest looking leaves, and had the best looking habit, and would grow in the southeast region the best. He evaluated those 42, and he picked one. He said, ladies and gentlemen, Cercis canadensis Ruby Falls, a weeping red. That's how he did it, okay? He started in 1998. I told my introductory horticulture class about this. I said, how many years do you think it took him to get this new one? They said, 2. He started in 98. It's been 12, 15 years for a woody plant. He's invested in this. There are the flowers on Ruby Falls. Now, I must proudly tell you that he gave me one long before they were available because I promised to feature it in a show. And here it is in my garden this year. Kept it in a container for 1 year and then planted it this spring. So here it is. And what we're finding out about Ruby Falls, and Denny's very quick to point this out, is the redness is more brilliant and stays longer the older the plant gets. Hey, when I was 12, I couldn't grow a Mustang. Okay. So there's a certain level of establishment and maturity that oftentimes increases or enhances the ornamental features that we're looking at. Well, Dr. Werner, since he was doing this, he said, well, I'm not going to stop there. He said, I'm going to try this. He took Cercis canadensis texensis, which was a Texas form of redbud. Okay, it was Texas white was the cultivar. And he crossed it with Forest Pansy. Forest Pansy is a great redbud, except it grows kind of wide and rangy. All right, and all the landscape designers will tell you that the best small trees are those that have this very kind of upright vase-shaped habit. Not only that, but Cercis canadensis, texensis, Texas white. The Texas variety has really good drought tolerance, and the leaves are more kidney-shaped and shiny. And so Denny was thinking about taking those, trying to get those characteristics into a plant with better habit and a burgundy color. So he crossed these two, and he crossed them. He did the same thing. He crossed them. He collected the seeds. He planted the seeds out. They grew up into big, regular green ones. He collected those seeds. You ready for this? There were 4 out of that F2 generation. There were 4 that had the, that had the characteristics. And out of the 4, he picked this one and introduced it as Merlot. Merlot. See the shine in the leaves, kind of kidney shape, good drought tolerance, great flowers, deep, rich red flowers, and a burgundy color that lasts quite a long time. This photograph was taken probably 1st of June. So I was down in the sandhills with Denny walking through, looking at these plants. Okay, remember I told you that 4 out of the 400 had this? But he had the other ones planted in a row. Some of them didn't have, some of them were not burgundy. They had varied characteristics, and we walked by this one. It caught my eye. I said, Denny, what's that one? He goes, oh, that's one of Merlot's sisters. I said, well, what are you doing with it? He goes, nothing. I said, why not? He said, well, because I was looking for a deep burgundy, shiny leaf type. I said, well, let's go. Can we go look at it? He said, sure. So we got closer to it. That's what I did. I said, Denny, this is really cool. He said, what are you talking about? I said, I really like this. I said, are you going to do something with this? Because, once Denny picks one of those plants, then he works with a nursery to graft more, okay, build up stock, and evaluate them over time, and then they get introduced. That's why it took a while for Ruby Falls to be available, same with Merlot. And I said, Denny, I don't care whether you want to introduce this one or not, but could you maybe graft a few of these and give me one? Because I would really like it. Well, when I said that, he said, well, you know what? He said, I'm going to send some budwood to the nursery in Tennessee that builds them up. I'm going to have them propagate them and then let them evaluate them, and maybe we've got a new cultivar coming up. Now, Denny's got a lot of different redbuds he's working on, but I keep asking him about this one. I've already come up with a name, and I bet you would come up with the same name too. Well, if it's a sister or a sibling of Merlot, then this should be Rosé. It just makes perfect sense. Then call it the wine series, and then people come in the garden and say, I'm looking for a wine series redbud. See? Okay. I'm so proud of this plant because, Mitzi, in 1996-7, okay, the J.C. Ralston Arboretum decided to promote this plant as an absolutely fantastic perennial plant. We even grew them, gave them to nurserymen, told them to market them. We said, this plant is better than sliced cheese. This is Arkansas star Amsonia hubrichtii. It's got light blue flowers that are really nothing to write home about, but look at that great foliage. All right, check this out. Okay, there's the flower coming out. Here it is, planted with Aster Fricardia mancha. It's been around for a long time, blooms in the summer, flowering Aster, starting to turn in the fall. Ready? Okay, you see how it's starting to turn yellow? Okay. By the way, at the NC State Fair, I saw this just day before yesterday. This is Purple Dome. It's been around for about 5 years. It's one of the few asters that generally does not flop. It's about 30 inches and considered dwarf. It does not flop. Okay. But let's get back to Amsonia. That's why we grow it in our gardens, right? Because of the foliage texture and this incredible yellow. You know what? The Perennial Plant Association named it the Perennial Plant of the Year for 2011. J.C. Ralston Arboretum was promoting this plant back in 1996-97. Boy, did we have it right? So what a great plant. And then anytime I ever speak about plants, I always include Chionanthus retusus, the Asian relative of our native retusus, of our native virginicus, I'm sorry. Okay. Here it is, without any pruning, growing in my own garden. Early to mid-April, these white strap-like flowers, absolutely incredible all over that plant. After the leaves come out, and the leaves are deciduous, but they look evergreen, shiny, beautiful, oval leaves. Produce blue fruit that is somewhat attractive, and then the birds eat them in the winter. Okay. This plant is dioecious. That means there are boy and girl plants. This plant is Tim, I believe it's still only propagated by seed in the nursery industry, right?
There are some cultivars.
Some cultivars coming now, okay? I learned this from Dr. Werner. If you put a female in your garden, it will produce fruit, even though there's no male around. Okay? This plant has the ability to create flowers, even though it's a girl plant, it'll create some male flowers to make sure that all the other ones get pollinated. Any port in a storm. Isn't that awesome? That's awesome. I mean, the plant is able to do that. And then it's got ridge and furrowed bark. At least one form of it has ridge and furrowed bark. The southern form tends to have prettier bark. Fall color, not unless you live north of the Mason-Dixon line where you get anywhere decent fall color. David Creech sent me this from Nacogdoches, Texas. The newspapers this summer touted this plant as being the most drought-tolerant small tree in Texas during their drought. Believe me, their drought was horrible. And this planting here was put in on the Stephen F. Austin State campus. And the plants were irrigated to establishment. That meant that they received enough water for the first year. Once those plants were established, they've not been irrigated since, and they're wonderful. So here's a great small tree. Is it new? No, it's been around for quite some time, but it's getting more and more attention. And we've been growing oak leaf hydrangea for years. All kinds of different cultivars available, new ones, old ones, but I just wanted to take a minute and say, let's put this in our garden. I mean, shade tolerance too. I even have some growing in full sun with great fall color, great flowers, wonderful. This is in my garden. I like it even after it's flowered, where the flowers are somewhat, the sterile flowers are slightly pink. Great understory, okay? $5 prize, whoever can tell me where this photo was taken.
My garden.
I didn't bring my wallet. Great fall color if you put it in a sunny location. Hydrangea quercifolia, little honey. Little honey is a mutation. It was a mutated branch they cut. Here's little honey with the other side of Dr. Denny Werner's passion, and that's breeding red buds. Blue chip was one of the first red buds that Denny came out with, one that doesn't need deadheading, reflowers. It was the first one that came out dwarf. Okay, Denny, dwarf. Let's go back. Dwarf is just slow growing. There's no such thing as dwarf. This probably, in my garden, I've seen it grow as large as about 3 feet, 3.5, 4 feet. I just cut it back every other year. What a great combination, little honey with blue chip. There's lilac chip. Denny sent me this photo. I said, please send me a photo of lilac chip. He sent me this one. I don't know about the dog. I don't know the story behind the dog. But there's lilac chip. It's a dwarf, seedless, no deadheading necessary, purple. Here it is out at the Sandhills Research Station. You can see it's about a little bit less than 18 inches tall, somewhat pendulous habit. Then there's ice chip, which is a white dwarf, light blue chip. These all came out of Denny's breeding program. And then I was out at the NC State Fair Thursday, and where's Amelia? So Amelia, we were talking, and the purple haze right there looks even better than this. A dwarf, seedless, no deadheading, larger, purple flowers. These all came from Dr. Werner taking all the different species of Buddleia and picking out those that he felt had the characteristics that we gardeners want in a butterfly bush. We want dwarfness, we want, they're very weedy, so if you could get one that has sterile flowers and something that we don't have to keep deadheading to promote the flowers, that's where all these came out of, and they've been lauded all over the world as being some of the best redbuds. So now some of the new improved or unused. This, I got my first Acer palmatum rayusa, and there's a beautiful specimen of this in the Japanese garden. Okay, this is a green-leafed weeper with dynamic orange fall color, and there's the one in the Arboretum. I have one on my wall growing and just hanging over. It's a non-grafted type. Euphorbia martinia. This is Ascot Rainbow. This was being evaluated up at North Creek Nurseries up in Pennsylvania. I was up there visiting. They said, oh, come see our evaluations. They're evaluating new plants. Ascot Rainbow is nice and tightly packed for euphorbia. It stays nice and tightly packed like that. It's variegated, yellow-green, develops a pink tinge, and then a yellow-green cluster of bracts. So it caught my eye, and I thought, you know, that's something I need to incorporate into my garden, Ascot Rainbow. I don't even want to talk about the purple coneflowers. For two reasons. One, I can't keep up with all the new ones. And two, I haven't found many that actually perform really well in my garden, and maybe it's me. So I'll take responsibility for that. But here's one that caught my eye up at North Creek. This is Southern Belle, which apparently flowers better through the entire summer, is what I read in the literature, with this very, very bubblegum pink composite flower. Get your attention, doesn't it? When we went to Plant Delights, spent 3 days there with Tony, did a show down there with Plant Delights, and our plant of the week was Ligularia japonica, Chinese dragon, which was collected in China about 3 years ago. If you've got a swamp, if you've got a stream, if you've got a low spot that never drains, put this there, partially sunny location. Look at the leaf. I just want this plant for the leaf. Grows about 4 to 5 feet tall, rounded habit of growth. This is one leaf, one simple leaf there, highly dissected. But if you have the right environment, these butter-colored flowers in late May, early June. So if you've got a partially shaded location in a real low-lying wet area. Now, Tony told me, so did Mike Spafford. Both of them said, if this thing goes in a dry location or if it gets dry, you'll lose it. It just really, really needs wet feet. And then they proceeded to dig up two little plants for me, and I have them in pots right now underneath a bench on my patio. Again, heucheras, I just put one in there to say there are lots of them, and wait a week, and there'll be more. And this one caught my eye. This is called Kassandra. Kassandra's, it says it's unique because as the leaves come out, they're more red, then they turn a lighter pink color, and then more green. And actually, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind that. That has some unique and interesting characteristics for a partially shady or shady location. Visiting Hawks Ridge Nursery last year, Rick Crowder took me over and said, hey, look at this one, Plum Magic. It's a 5 to 8 foot crepe myrtle that's pink with burgundy colored leaves. Yeah, I did the same thing. So I took a couple photos of that. You all familiar with Daphne-phyllum? Whoops. I took this photo yesterday. This is on the east side of the west side of our building at Kilgore, and it's not getting much sun anymore. And so Daphne-phyllum looks like a giant rhododendron that will not flower. In the fall, it looks like this. If you have it in a sunny location, it develops more reddish color along the petioles and the vein down the middle of the leaf. Wonderful plant. There's one planted right as you head into the annual, is it still there? Mm-hmm. As you head into the annual trial plots there by that path, it's on the left. Okay? And this is, to me, this is why I grow it in my garden, is for the late fall, winter, and early spring red color. It does produce blue fruit as well. But while I was walking through Tony's garden, lo and behold, Daphne-phyllum macropodium variegatum, the variegated Daphne-phyllum. Who cares whether this one flowers or has fruit? In a nicely shady location. I don't know, and Tim, you may help me. Do we get the same red coloration in the winter?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I think it could be very challenging.
You think what?
It's only propagated by grafting.
By grafting. Hard to get a hold of. But boy, I'll tell you what, in a garden environment, that really jumps out at you. You remember Big Bloomers? I was at Big Bloomers and I picked up a Fatsia japonica spider's web. There's variegata on the left. It's been around for quite some time. Spider's web is perhaps a little bit more rare. And how many know of spider's web? Okay, great. I bought one. And the older it gets, the more unique and interesting the leaves get. But in one short summer, when you get them at Big Bloomers, they're in a 4-inch pot. They're this big. Thankfully, because of August, I was able to get this one established, and these are the newest leaves that came out since about the second week of August when we started to get some more rain. It's already starting to show some of that spider webbiness for a partially shady location. My wife is very upset with me. because she doesn't like elephant ears, and I'm in one of my stages. Does anybody get in their stages? Do you get in those plant stages where you go on a craze for one kind of plant? Is anybody, am I the only one? Okay. You know, I've been in my dwarf conifer stage. That one was short-lived. You know, deciduous shrub phase. I'm in the colocasia phase. I'm in the elephant ear phase. So, you know, I have them in pots. I think that's why my wife doesn't like them, because then when I leave town, I ask her to water them. And these things, you can hear them drinking. I mean, it's Elena, pink china. This is one of my favorites. This came out of Dr. Cho's, the Hawaiian series. This is, I'll tell you, Diamond Head. Oh, it's just fantastic. I took that picture just the other day. I mean, just the leaves are, it's a cross between kind of a rusty, burgundy, black, Diamond Head, beautiful, beautiful plant. And the petioles are just red as all get out once the fall comes. Pink china is supposedly one of the hardiest in our area, and it has pink petioles. I put one little plant here this late spring, early summer, and it has thrived. Of course, you know, all the carex that have come from New Zealand, talk about new plants coming from a new region. This is prairie sun. In terms of beautiful brown coloration, orangey color in the fall. And then you know, when we were at Tony's, this was the one that his head was spinning over, black coral, which is, he said they wanted to call it Texas Valdez or Exxon Valdez, but he thought that would be a good idea. I said, Tony, you probably should have. You're the only one who could get away with it. But black coral is one of the newest in that Hawaiian series that I know Tony had made it available at his first open house back in earlier this summer. So in 2003, the Plant Delight researcher went to Thailand, looked around, came back with Thailand giant. I got a seedling from Dennis Werner from his propagation class that was this big, and I put it in a pot. Okay, and that's not even as big as it gets because I've had it in this pot. All right.
How long?
This photo was taken 2 weeks ago.
How old is that plant from the seedling?
This spring. I'm not kidding. Dr. Julia Cornegay, anybody been to her garden this year? Okay, she's got one that's twice this size in the ground next to a pond. Thailand giant. Supposed to be hardy. We'll see. I'm going to take this, I'm going to leave it in the pot, and I'm going to take it, put it in my crawl space, and then bring it back out and plant it in the landscape next year. Because I don't think I can upsize it. I mean, I don't think I would grow a pot big enough. I mean, the corm in here must be huge. This plant makes me laugh. It's huge. It's supposedly hardy, and it comes true from seed. There are flowers in there. Small white spats. Okay, that's where Denny got all these seeds. And all these students went home and planted one of these in their mom's garden. It's a whole new Jack and the Beanstalk. Okay. Lola. Oh my gosh, what a great red hot poker. The flower is probably 4 to 6 inches tall and as brilliant as you see here. This was over at Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden. Lola. 2 reasons why this one's going in my garden. 1, because it's just this wonderful cultivar, and 2, it reminds me of my youth and that song, Lola, by the Kinks. Right. Someday, I want you to get on, not yet because it's not on yet, but get on the In the Garden website on UNC-TV, and or go to the In the Garden Facebook page, and you're going to see an outtake of a man singing Lola into this microphone. If we're not whimsical about the plants that we have, if they don't conjure up emotion, then why don't we have them in the garden? Warning, I see this plant, okay, red majestic contorted filbert at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum with the sparkling burgundy eucomis down in front. I said, oh my gosh, I've got to have this. A week later I came back and the temperature just went up. Looked like crap. This is a perfect example of a great cultivar that's probably not really good this far south. It's just too dang hot. For the reason it was selected, and it's these wonderful burgundy leaves, okay? At least my observation has been, you know, and I'm really upset. I'm not willing to move north just for this plant. But there's my point. You know, new plants are great if you're in the absolute right spot. And this one, oh man, for a week it does it. But then after that, once it starts getting warm, forget it. Okay, so last thing before I turn you loose. New ideas. And this isn't new plants, this is new ideas. Just some things I've thought about. George White is the head horticulturist at Brook Green Gardens in, down in Pawleys Island. And he grows caladium in full sun. What? Yeah, he does. He grows 3 cultivars of caladium in full sun. And so the new idea here is there are some that are touted that can grow in full sun, but here's the secret. Here's the secret. These must be planted as corms. Don't plant the plants. In other words, if you plant White Queen as a plant and it gets full sun, it will die. But if you plant the corm, it will thrive. And this is, so I saw it at Brook Green, I brought it home, and this was my planting this year of White Queen in full sun. Florida Sweetheart is the red. It's a little bit lower down in front of White Queen. I did the same thing in my garden, planted the corms, they were fine. And then the third one, there's Florida Sweetheart. Isn't that wonderful? And you know what? As it gets cooler at night in the fall, the red fades. It's just the opposite of what you would expect. So it holds that red color well into the summer. And then the last one, this one actually is in a half sun, half shade location. This is Carolyn Wharton. Carolyn Wharton. But George tells me all three will do full sun if you plant the corms and not, or the tubers, and not the plants. Don't buy the plants, buy the tubers. This is a floating island. If you've been to Tony's, you've seen this floating in his retention pond. Okay, mitigating the nitrogen-rich waters, and it helps purify the water. Okay, this is one of the new hibiscus called Cranberry Crush. Cranberry Crush. That's on my patio. It's different than Fireball. I have Fireball, I have Cranberry Crush. It's a little bit tighter, a little bit neater, very, very floriferous. And then Hibiscus Moschuto's Copper Queen is related to Copper King, but Copper Queen has a more burgundy colored leaf. So they're just 2 of the many hibiscus. There's a nursery up in, Tim, do you know what the name of the nursery up in Minnesota? Is it Minnesota, Wisconsin? Doesn't matter, but they're doing a lot of research and development of hibiscus. And you know what they're doing? Is they're taking the subtropical varieties, the ones that won't grow here, and trying to get the genetics from them for new and improved flower color. Because you know the subtropical ones have some wild flower color. So trying to combine those, plant breeders are. I was at Chanticleer. I don't know why I don't do this in my garden. I go to Chanticleer, I see chairs that complement the landscape. There's Callicarpa in here, there's flower heads of some hydrangea. You see how they color echo? Isn't that wonderful? And I was at the island of Mainau in Germany this year and went to get a bratwurst and German potato salad and went to the snack bar where you buy that, and then this was the eating area. And they take a container and run it right down the middle. Okay, by the way, these are trunks of pear trees, edible pear trees. And then you can see, oh look, there's a plant that came from NC State. Okay, but here's this nice little bed in between the 2 eating areas. And so you can come and sit down and eat, and you're not bothered by the fact that strangers are eating here, because the plants create a separation that's psychological. And isn't that a great idea? Okay. 2 good old-fashioned plants I saw together, and it elicited some emotion. Persian shield and pineapple sage. And I might not have thought about putting the 2 together, but then when I saw the 2 together at Longwood Gardens, it like I said, it got me all excited. So with that, 2 things. One, new plants are great, but it's really about the plant. Okay? And 2, thank you for your attention. I don't take that for granted. I know you could have done a whole lot of other things today, and hopefully either you're thinking something new, you're feeling something new, or you're going to do something new. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.